Now, it seemed really unlikely that Britain would be dragged into a European war. On July the 21st, the British Prime Minister, Asquith, said, "We are within distance of a real Armageddon. Happily, there seems to be no real reason why we should be any more than a spectator." Now, some people say that Britain entered the First World War because of the arms race, the naval arms race with Germany. However, the British were winning the naval arms race quite comfortably. The British had 32 dreadnoughts and 10 battle cruisers to the Germans' 21 dreadnoughts and 8 battle cruisers, and so the British have a comfortable naval superiority to the German high seas fleet. One of the long-running arguments between the British and the Germans had been the Berlin to Baghdad railway, which the British were worried would allow the German army to get to threaten the British Indian Empire. But this dispute was almost already resolved by 1914 and was just awaiting Germany's signature. Germany had accepted in March of 1914 that South Mesopotamia, Central and Southern Persia were in Britain's sphere of influence and would be controlled by the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, what's now called BP. What used to be the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company became the British Persian Oil Company and then British Petroleum. And so the argument about the Berlin to Baghdad Railway had already been resolved. Now, on July the 23rd, Lloyd George, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, said that relations with Germany are better than they have been for years. We can soon make cuts in our naval expenditure. And so Britain's not thinking about war. Britain is not pushing for war. In fact, they're thinking that they can start to reap the benefits of peace and start to reduce their military expenditure. On July the 24th, Grey was confident that he can keep Russia calm about Serbia. Now, we have here the Austro-Hungarian ambassador to Britain. The German government believes it has proof that England would not take part in a war, even if Russia and France were involved. Now, Grey told Russia that England will not prevent Austria from calling Serbia to account. It is only the destruction of the whole nation of Serbia that we would not permit. The world then read the ultimatum the Austrians gave to the Serbs, and everything changed. And so it wasn't the invasion of Belgium that changed everything for the British. It was the ultimatum the Austrians gave to the Serbs. It shocked the British that any nation could demand such a huge amount from another sovereign state. Now, the British and Russians then asked for their delay, and Grey proposed a 6-power conference in London to mediate the dispute, as had happened in 1912-13 over the disputes over the Balkans and Morocco. Now, as it happens, all the ambassadors of the previous conference were still in London because they were all close friends. When they'd last managed to pull the world back from the brink of war, the 6 ambassadors who'd managed to save the peace had actually got to really like each other and had got on, and so they'd stayed in London. And they said, when they asked how quickly they could gather to meet, they said that they could meet again in just 2 hours to try and discuss a peaceful resolution to this crisis. Now, who were these people who could save the peace? Well, there was Lichnowsky of Germany, there was Benkendorf of Russia, there was Cambon of France, there was Mendorf of Austro-Hungary, and there was Imperial to represent Italy, and Grey would represent Britain. Now, the German delegate, Lichnowsky, begged Berlin for 3 days. He said, just give me 3 days to accept the proposal and try and preserve the peace. He says that if war came, England, I am certain, will place herself unconditionally on the side of France and Russia if war comes under these circumstances. But Berlin rejects the appeals of their own ambassador and then forced the Austro-Hungarians to reject it too. And on the 29th of July, Grey asked if a great power conference could meet in Berlin. He said he knew that the Germans had been behind the rejection and was really surprised, was shocked that any great power would reject out of hand a peace conference to try and resolve, and he decided that it must have been because the peace conference was going to be in London. There was a lot of prestige attached to what city hosted these conferences, and he thought, oh my god, how could I be so insensitive? Of course the Germans are angry, they're involved in this conference, they would want it in Berlin. And so he said, right, that's fine, why don't we hold the peace conference in Berlin to resolve this dispute, which of course again is rejected. On the 30th of July, Poincare, the French president, says that if Britain allies publicly with France, then Germany would back down. He says that if the Germans knew that the British were guaranteed to enter, then that would stop this. And that's very doubtful, as Germany had already mobilised at this stage. It was simply too late. Now, Germany offered a swathe of northern France to Belgium if it would allow its army to enter. They said to Belgium, our army's coming through. If you don't resist this, if you let us occupy your country, then after the war we will reward you with a vast swathe of northern France. But all they wanted was free passage through Belgium. But the Belgian government refused and ordered its small army to fight. And Belgium plays a key role for the British. Now, the British had the right to defend Belgium, but not the obligation. People think that the British bit of paper said they had to defend Belgium. Not at all. It said the British had the right to defend Belgium. Now, if the Belgium hadn't have fought, then it's probable the British wouldn't have fought. If the Belgians had stood aside and let the German army in, then the British would have found it very difficult to actually mobilise for war in those circumstances. Now, leader of the cabinet doves, the people in the cabinet who were pushing for the British to stay out of the First World War, when they said, why did things change? Why did the British get involved in the war? When asked, he said why the British got involved, they said it was all to do with Belgium. Now, when in the cabinet discussed and said, what happens if the Germans do invade Belgium, Grey, who were quite keen to keep the British out of the war, responded with, they wouldn't. They couldn't. But, of course, they did. When Germany attacked Belgium, then the planned peace conference are cancelled. The war demonstrations start to spring up in London, and the peace demonstrations that had been proposed are cancelled by the British public. Now, there are allegations that the British fought a war for money. However, this is simply not true. The governor of the Bank of England had told the government that they were against the war, that the war would be harmful to British financial interests. On the 1st of August, Litnosky, the poor man, broke down weeping while talking to the British Prime Minister, Asquith. He said that he wished his country had stopped Austro-Hungary. It's the day that Germany had declared war on Russia. France rejected the German ultimatum, and we have here the words of Churchill. There was never a chance of France being allowed to escape her ordeal. Even cowardice and dishonour would not save her. The Germans had resolved that if war came from any cause, then they would break France forthwith. She would have begged for mercy in vain. She did not beg. And we have here the words of Haldane, the Lord Chancellor. It would be a war not merely for the overthrow of France and Russia, but for the domination of the world. I knew that if we kept out and allowed Germany to get possession, even for a time, of the northeast shore of France, our turn would come later, and that we should be in the greatest peril, and that we might go down without a friend in the world, with a tremendous combination against us. The war was declared for the British on the 4th of August. Moltke had told Tirpitz not to stop the British Expeditionary Force arriving in France, as he wanted the German army to destroy the British army on its way to Paris. And we have here the words of Grey after the declaration of war. Thus, the efforts of a lifetime go for nothing. I feel like a man who has wasted his life.